Welcome to Dil Ki Recipes on your favorite social media platform. Hi, I'm Dr. Sheeza Mohsin, executive coach, relationship expert, and your coach in this virtual space to support you and your Desi family in America. If you identify as being a person of color, a minority, and having some form of bicultural identity, a major goal of putting this information out is to help you realize you're not alone in this journey. If you identify as a Desi with cultural roots in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and surrounding areas, trying to meet your life and relationship needs and desires while embracing some beautiful elements of your cultural heritage, Dil Ki Recipes is for you. If you don't identify as a Desi, but have a warm, loving, human being kind of disposition and you want to better yourself, I think you'll find some good stuff in here as well. So let's go on with the show. Welcome to Dil Ki Recipes, and I am so excited to introduce a wonderful, wonderful soul and an exceptional professional to you in the field of working with teenagers, their parents, and of course, being so exposed to not just the issues in the Western world, but well versed in the issues as it relates to our kiddos in the Desi community who have bicultural identities. Welcome, Sana Kheiri. I am so excited that you're on today.
Thank you, Sheeza. I'm so happy to be here.
You have some very pertinent training, which I will tell you, it's unfortunate that our community does not choose this field as much as it's needed. So your degree is in psychology, which is fantastic. Of course, I have a bias. And then you have trained in an ICF accredited program, core energy as the focus, but you also specialize in group dynamics and leadership within that. So it makes complete sense that you are helping teenagers be the better version of themselves. And Sana, I'm going to give you a chance to really explain your work, but as I understand it, it's a component of executive functioning, critical thinking skills, so they can achieve their goals. And as I understand it, you work alongside parents as well, because they're such a big part of these teenagers trying to improve, I guess, in this critical stage of life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that introduction. And before I explain what I do, I just want to say what an honor it is to share this space with you. I really do admire the work that you're doing, not just with Dil Ki Recipes, but otherwise, and especially for South Asian families and how you bring compassion and cultural understanding together. And that's really powerful. And I think that really what connects with the work I do too, in a way. My work as a core energy coach really is about helping people understand the energy that drives our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, and then how that energy impacts everyone around them, and especially in families. So now when people usually hear the word energy, they sometimes think I'm talking about something really abstract or spiritual.
You know, the only word I know for energy is energy healing or Reiki work or something. So please elaborate.
Which is all great too. But for
Yes.
my work, energy really is about emotional awareness. What's happening inside us before we even say a word. For example, those moments when, let's say, a parent walks into a room and they're stressed and upset and no one's saying anything, but the whole room feels it. Really the invisible communication, and that really sets the emotional temperature, let's say, of the home, right? So that's what energy means to me. And then through energy coaching and the energy leadership, since you mentioned that framework, I help teens and parents identify the level of energy they're operating from. So to make it simple, at a lower level of energy, you're more in like a survival mode. We react maybe from guilt or fear or control or anger. Whereas in higher levels, we're a little bit more aware. We respond maybe from curiosity, from compassion, even joy. And so when families really start to notice these energy shifts in real time, something really changes, right? They stop taking everything so personally, and they start asking, what energy am I responding from right now? Where is it coming from? And that one question can really transform a whole conversation, especially in moments of conflict, which is, we know, especially with teens and children in the house, is very prevalent sometimes.
Sana, this is so enlightening. I would like you to continue sharing with our listeners a little bit more about this. So, for example, what should parents be noticing for their teenagers in terms of their energy to know, hey, you know what, we need to maybe get some resources to help this kid, especially with the South Asian diaspora, where we are so task focused and sometimes tuning into the emotional energy of a kid doesn't come naturally to us.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And now, since you're mentioning Desi families, so like the component or the energy I was talking about, there's an added layer. So a lot of our energy in Desi households, South Asian households, sits on duty or achievement, like you said, right? We're so focused on that to keep the peace and to do the right thing, or what will people say energy is much more prevalent. And sure, it usually comes from love, but it's also like wanting to raise good kids, and wanting your families to be respected, and all of those things, again, like what would people say. So sometimes that energy can create that emotional distance, and when we're so focused on doing the right thing, sometimes those parents are missing out on what's really real, what's being felt underneath. Just to give you a simple example, I had a mom once who said to me, she called me and she's like, I don't know what's wrong with my son. I'm constantly yelling at him, and he just doesn't respect me. And we talked about it for a bit, and then she laughed and said, actually, I sound just like my own mom. And this was a South Asian lady too. When we really slowed down, she realized she wasn't as angry as she was tired. She had been pouring herself into her family, keeping everybody together, keeping the cultural norms, but nobody had paused to ask how she was doing. Once she shared that with her son, not as a lecture, but just more out of honesty, the son was just like, Mama, I didn't know that you felt that way. It went from like this blame game to a little bit of a connection. That's what I love about this work, right? It's not, I don't want to give people scripts or parenting tricks and hacks, but it's more about helping them shift their outlook underneath, right? The interaction, and you really get down to the core. And once you shift that energy, everything else starts to shift too, like a ripple effect with the parent's emotional state.
That is so powerful, Sana. As you were talking, I was thinking, man, in the Desi community, we're so outcome based, but being outcome based with respect for or holding space for that energy can really better those relationships. Because in my world, I see a lot of relational distress between the teenager and parent. And to your point, I'm wondering if the kid wants the parent to ask, how are you feeling? Instead of just what you need to do.
What I see with a lot of Desi teens is this feeling of living between two worlds. So at school, they're encouraged to speak up, express themselves, but at home, they're being told, be respectful, don't talk back, just listen, all of those things. So that constant code switching can be exhausting. Like many of these kids tell me, my parents love me, they get it, but they don't really get me, and that's heartbreaking, because you can hear that they recognize the love, but there's also that sense of little bit of loneliness in there, right? Desi teens aren't like rebelling to reject their culture necessarily, right? They're rebelling because they're trying to integrate these two worlds that sometimes pull them in very opposite directions. So they're just trying to figure out how to belong in both spaces, right? They're not hating on one for the other, but it's more like, how do I belong? But they come home and they express this independence, and often the Desi parents are seeing it as a thing of rebellion. And then the teen starts to pull back, not because they don't care about the parent, but because they don't feel understood. So, I remember this girl, she was 16, and she said, I can't really tell my mom who I really am because I don't want to disappoint her. And that words, right? You don't want to disappoint your mother for who you are. That's almost sad. So then she's editing herself to kind of fit into the version of her and performing really that feels more acceptable, right, at home. And that emotion, she's hiding herself. So that emotionally takes a toll.
Sana, we know about the Desi culture and this whole guilt and shame thing that goes on, where all these transports disappointments. Because I see the millennial young adults in my practice, I meet with so many people, and they're still struggling with that disappointment. So, in that process, they're not sharing a piece of themselves or a large piece of themselves with the parents. And parents are feeling that disconnect, but they feel so helpless. And a lot of it begins in that tender age that, the teenage and young adult that you're working with. We program our kids to just disconnect emotionally.
And just listen, right?
And listen, and I want to go with this word energy because I love it. And I'm very energy sensitive. So they're
Right.
really not checking in with their emotions. They're checking in on, is it safe to say something? And so many times, parents, when they tell me, my kid doesn't say anything. When I say, how is your day? Fine. How is everything? Okay. And I'm like, oh, so tell me now, what do you do to add to that?
Right, right. And that's what, to me, I keep every single parent of any child of any age, I keep saying, like, ask that open-ended question, like it's something that cannot be answered in a yes or no or one-word answer. Reframe your questions with something that shows your interest, not just like, oh, I'm going down the script. How was your day? what'd you eat, which I do that too, by the way, I'm not going to lie. However, also be conscious how to frame your questions that seem like you're actually interested no matter how busy you are. But what happens sometimes with Desi parents, they sometimes think of these things as disrespect or disinterest, and they automatically misread it as rejection. This child is rejecting me in
Absolutely.
the culture. Right? So, and they panic.
It's so true. And I want to give a shout out to the parents. We have a very good, committed set of parents in our community.
Yeah.
It's just that I feel that their skills need updating. And to your point about the whole rebellion versus being understood and code switching. So, in the book I wrote, it's a self help book, there's a chapter where I'm just quoting the statements I've heard from so many people in groups and individual sessions.
Yeah.
The most feedback I get is from that chapter, not from the self help steps I have mentioned, just the relatability of the frustrations of all the things we are not able to communicate because people are not looking for that energy that you work with. They're not reading the room, is what it's called, in
Reading
many
the room.
ways.
I like that. They're not reading the room.
They're not. And in their homes, if they're not reading the room, that has a big consequence. What do you notice when you work with Desis? I also want to talk about this whole stigma around working with a coach, working with a Desi coach. In my view, because I am trained as a coach and a therapist and counselor, I feel that there's so much value when you are trained and certified with an accredited organization because you're learning these skills that are really translating into actionable success for a person. Talk to me about the stigma, the things you hear in our community that we can help dilute.
100%. I think it does help to go to somebody who has a similar background, but because like you said, there's so much unsaid that could be understood before you even say anything. I think the hesitation, what used to be a little bit more prevalent is getting better now, is just the stigma of going to get help, be it a therapist or a coach, and there's nothing wrong with us, there's nothing wrong with my kid, that outwardly show. But that's definitely getting better. I definitely see a lot more people being aware of the benefits. But I think it's also sometimes there's the trust factor, even though we know that, client confidentiality, this, I know this. We are not going to sit and discuss any client. We would never take names. We would never discuss a case in our day-to-day lives. However, I don't know if a lot of people realize this. I think that's the hesitation that, if I go to a South Asian or Desi therapist or a coach, what if, they know somebody that I know that knows somebody? So they don't want anybody finding out. I think that's a big hesitation. However, I think the advantage of coming to somebody Desi would be far more than even the thought of that. Not that any of us are doing that.
I love that you are explaining this so well because it is so critical to have that cultural knowledge. And I think it just puts professionals that you're working with at such an advantage. Otherwise, so many people have complained to me that when they work with somebody who's not familiar with the culture, you're giving them a cultural course before they can ever help you, which to me, now we have so many people in the space that we can access. The other thing that I want to talk about is this whole perfectionism of I'm perfect, I don't have anything to fix, my kid is perfect, they don't have anything to fix. So I don't want anyone to know. I think we still have some opportunity for growth in normalizing that no one is perfect. We learn. And then the other thing I will put out, and this is for listeners as well, for those of you who may be considering therapy or coaching, I just want to disclaim there are good and not so good in every profession, including coaching, including counseling and therapy. That's why doing your homework is so important because some people, unfortunately, may not be the best fit in their field. In coaching, especially, Sana, I will say, and I love that you're ICF accredited because your training is from a vetted organization. It makes a difference. But right now in our culture, because of lack of expertise, we do see a lot of people who claim they are coaches, but they're not trained.
Right. And I can see the hesitation then because of that too. However, like you said, vetting and doing your research on who it is, and not just vetting. Anytime I have somebody come to me for the first time, the one thing I do say is let's talk and see if we're a good fit for each other. So I could be a great coach, but we might just not be a good fit. And I promise that I'm going to be transparent, but you also please be transparent and let me know, I don't think this is working, or don't feel stuck in a situation, be it a coach or a client, doesn't matter, because it's equally important to have that rapport, to understand each other, to actually get to somewhere versus just going through session to session to session.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And thank you for mentioning that, because I feel that, you don't find your person till you find your person. A lot of times I am the third coach therapist that somebody's coming to, or the fourth one. And also we grow out of the work and the capacity of professionals as well. It happens all the time. It's really important to keep that in mind as you're looking for someone. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about parents, because getting help for teenagers and young adults, I'm a systemic therapist. So when I do, and now I don't have the bandwidth to work with teenagers. So now the youngest population I work with would be somebody going to college. So I had a requirement. I would always do that if the parents are not going to do parenting sessions with me, because, you cannot improve a young adult's state of being if they're living in the home. That is where all the triggers are. And you're just saying, fix my kid. Whereas a lot of the issues are stemming from the people who have the power in the home, the parents. So talk to me about how you guide. And this is not an attack on parents, because all of us need that support and need to improve and learn how to be a better version of ourselves for our children. How do you guide parents in that space? Because that's a population I really want to be open to accessing our worlds, because they can learn so much from there.
Absolutely. And then, like you said, the people who have the power in the home, they're really, I'll bring back my plug word of energy back into this. They're really dictating what the energy is. So that's why I really try to help parents see, right? That a lot of times it's not, when, again, we spoke about this, I'm not going to repeat it, but it isn't really about disrespect, right? For them to understand this part, that it's a normal process of becoming your own person. All teenagers do it, be it South Asian, Desi, not Desi, all children go through this, right? But like I said, it's sometimes often misread as rejection, because we spoke about the achievement mode and the what will people say type of mode. So there's an added layer. One small shift, I think, that really helps, if the parent can move from that control to curiosity. So instead of asking, why are you doing this? This is not how we do it. Try and reframe it and say, help me understand what this means to you. You don't have to necessarily agree or disagree at that point. You're just trying to understand out of curiosity where your child is coming from. So that one question tells your teen, just that one simple question, is that you matter, your perspective matters, and I want to know, I'm curious, right? That's all. So, but for a teenager, that's everything, because once they feel seen, they stop fighting to be heard. That's what they're really doing. And that's where the problem arises, right? The behavior or the banging of the door or the this or the eye rolls or the screaming, shouting. Part is normal development and part is the rebellious act, right? I often say that in every Desi teen is trying to balance two sets of values, the we of the culture and the me of the world they're growing up in, right? So when we as parents or caregivers, whoever, meet them with empathy instead of fear that, oh my gosh, we're going to lose all of this, they realize that they don't have to choose. They can be Desi and different. And that's when the real emotional safety begins, right? When our homes stop being places of performance and start becoming places belonging. Like they don't have to fight for who they are and if they actually belong. And do I belong to this home or do I not? So
I'm going to repeat what you said because it's so magical. Places, our homes, being places of belonging versus being places of performance. I think this applies so much to the Desi family. That was so well said, Sana. And I think that more Desi parents need to hear that, because that emotional safety, it just can unlock so much potential for that kid who is just trying to be understood. So thank you for saying that.
we don't have to be just Desi or this. It can be hand in hand and we evolve. But I do have a question for you. You were earlier talking about your book, Behind Closed Doors, and that obviously opened up a lot of South Asian family experiences and a lot of things that don't really get talked about. It's kind of rare, the silence, the pressure, the emotional burnout. What do you wish parents could say more often behind closed doors?
I had so much imposter syndrome writing the book because this is the work that I do with my clients. And then I started realizing not everyone's ever going to land in therapy. It's the reality of our culture, right? And so Behind Closed Doors, the name was very important for me because, we come from such a formal, fine culture in the Desi family where all the fineness presents And then you have this conversation when the car door shuts, when you're at home, when you start psychoanalyzing. And I don't even know if it's the home door as much as the car door. Before you're going to an event, there's all this instruction happening in the car. When you come out of the event, there is that the door closes and why did you say this and what happened, and there's a hashing and very unsafe territory where the kids cannot run away because they're locked in a car. I will say the one thing that I love reintroducing is just to tell your kids, I understand how hard it is. And I may not understand a lot of your heart because I didn't walk that walk. Many of us who are first generation immigrants did not go to school here, not know the pain of being a person who looks different, who comes to a home that smells different, who's wondering if they should bring their friends over. Like, those are the tiny things. Our kids are not academically challenged. They are challenged in figuring out who they're going to have lunch with and who they're going to sit next to during recess. Just building your kid up to say, how do you do it? I can barely do it now, but you are magical because I wouldn't be able to survive. I use for parenting this example of my kid who in intermediate school had given me instructions because they were checking for safety. Is we would carpool and I was usually not a part of the carpool. So I was very happy when I was chosen and I got strict instructions. Do not say a word. And so I had to giggle in privacy and I was so tempted to open my mouth, but I was like, if I do, then I have messed it up. Also, I would love to tell parents, you're good parents. Don't judge yourself because you're going through a struggle with your teenager. It's not a reflection of your teenager. It's not a reflection on you. You just don't have the skills on how to deal with it. You have to other the problem so you don't feel personal shame for being a failure because you nailed it. We're so performative. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, that makes complete sense, and that really resonates too. Even as a parent myself, I don't know if you hear this. I hear it enough. Well, you don't know you know what you're doing because you're a coach. Like, no, I'm still a parent. I'm still making mistakes. I promise you, my kids, when they're older, even now, if you go up to any one of them, I'm sure they can list things that mom is not doing right. But like you said, it's okay. We're all doing the same thing. Give yourself that grace. Desi or not Desi, South Asian, not South Asian, doesn't matter. Even if you're not an immigrant, maybe you were born here. Give yourself grace as a parent. It's hard enough.
You've pointed out so many things that parents can learn from understanding the energy of their kids and also start being, like you said, being curious about their children versus judging them. The last question, I do want to spend a little bit of time because culturally it's very important, relevant, or gets overused, is this word respect. They don't respect me. I feel disrespected. Could you give examples, Sana, where this is just a kid emoting versus disrespecting you, or a kid just discovering? What are those moments when they see parents are feeling disrespected, whereas it's either part of just emotional growth of the teenager or them trying to communicate something to the parent?
So I think it's a bit of both, right? Of course, there is an element of the teen just being a teen and they're kind of testing their boundaries, right? They're trying to see how far I can go, how far I can stretch. And that would go for all teens, right? And I think that's actually a very, very healthy sign because to me, red flags are those perfect children who never test boundaries, who listen to everything they're saying, people pleasers, never does anything wrong. To me, that's a little bit more odd than the child pushing boundaries. So there's that element. The other element of the South Asian, they see definition of respect, right? I then want to challenge parents to write down what they mean by respect. Does respect mean listen to me regardless of what?
Raising your voice.
Yeah. Is that what respect is? And if that is, that's okay. There's no right or wrong answer. If that is, are you giving them that same respect then? It's a two-way street. Or is your definition of respect more about, let's communicate and understand each other? Again, no right or wrong answer, but you have to really define. I am nobody to define what values there are in your home, but are you reciprocating those same values to your child?
That's so powerful. And I'll just plug that in, Sana, for all our listeners and our viewers that, we come from a culture where respect is given because somebody's older than you. And we're living in a culture, and I think the culture there has changed as well. We live in a culture where respect is earned, credibility is earned, and parents struggle with that because the children are questioning their credibility. I tell my clients all the time, you cannot give to your children what you don't have. So if you are not being respectful of how you talk to your children in public spaces, in front of other people, how you hold regard for them and their privacy in gossiping or talking about them. Of course, as a parent, we talk about our children, but talking about them with some form of disdain, with some form of rejection, and then, that energy probably can be felt by the kid.
Right. And Shiza, definitely what you said in public, but even in privacy at home, if you're not giving that respect, how are we expecting to get that respect? What if it was some other adult we were talking to? Are we expecting to get the respect? This is also a human being, even if they're younger than us. They deserve it.
Give me your one line, if any teenager is hearing this, of some affirmation you would like them to remember as they're working through their bicultural identity and as they're working through a parent maybe doesn't understand them. What would you like to say to them?
For teenagers, I would say remember that your worth isn't measured by approval. You can honor your parents and still honor your own truth and who you are.
That's beautiful. Sana, this was so lovely. I think our listeners got so much out of it. I love the curiosity element that you have suggested in just transferring that shift for the parents, the children to know that there are multiple truths. They can honor their parents and still honor their own truth.
Thank you. And I think what you're doing with Dil Ki Recipes really is striking a chord, because both parents and teens, both are overwhelmed, each in their own way. And so you're kind of taking that upon yourself, kind of how do they take care of themselves emotionally? And I think that's what's so beautiful about Dil Ki Recipes. And it really is Dil Ki Recipes.
Yes, it just the title definitely resonates, and I am just so glad. And yes, it started with a passion project. It was recommended by clients, so I'm quite excited about where this is going to go. And really, the goal is to have continuous learning and growth opportunities for everyone in our community. To everyone listening, remember to subscribe and listen to the podcast and send me feedback and topics that you would like me to invite guests on. Have an awesome day, and I will see you soon. Please remember to keep listening and watching as part of your weekly self-care and learning ritual. You know there are lots of commonalities in our lives, relationships, in our joys and struggles. And my hope is that this material will help you expand your perspective, give you some clarity on how to think about things, and ultimately make you feel better and sorted about your life and relationships. Hope you have a fulfilling and wholesome day.